She didn't lower her voice. She didn't hesitate either. "It's only for family," my sister said, her eyes sliding past me like I was blocking her view of something more important. The message was still open on my phone. A long list of names. Decorations discussed. Outfits planned. Everyone was invited. Except me. No one around us noticed what had just happened. Someone laughed nearby. Someone asked about the cake. The moment passed for them. For me, it stayed. I waited for an explanation that didn't come. I waited for discomfort that never showed on her face. She looked comfortable. Confident. Certain. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't ask how I stopped being family. I just nodded and listened. Before I tell you how this turned out, if you've ever been excluded by people who were supposed to choose you, tap like. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own family? My name is Claire. I'm in my late 20s. For most of my life, I've been the one people overlook because I don't make noise. I was never the difficult one growing up. Never the dramatic one. I was the reliable one. If something needed to be handled quietly, it came to me. If paperwork confused my parents, I figured it out. If money was short and pride was high, I sent help without announcing it. I didn't keep score. I didn't demand appreciation. I thought that was what being family meant. My sister, on the other hand, was visible. She lived closer. She spoke louder. She liked being seen as the organizer, the decision maker. People trusted her because she sounded sure of herself. So when the anniversary plans started, it made sense that she was handling them. I never questioned that. I assumed, wrongly, that my place was automatic. That's the thing about people who always show up. Others start believing they don't need to be invited. When I asked her about the date, she barely looked up from her phone. That's when she said it. That single sentence that rearranged something inside me. "It's only for family." As if the word had rules I didn't qualify for anymore. Later, I found out she didn't just leave me out quietly. She explained my absence for me. "She's busy." She wouldn't have come anyway. "She's changed." She said it casually, like facts everyone already knew. And no one questioned it. Because she was there. Smiling. Hosting. Speaking for all of us. I saw the photos online before anyone called me. Matching outfits. Toasts. A caption that read, "Family is everything." I didn't comment. I didn't correct anyone. I let the story settle exactly how she told it. Because confidence makes people careless. And careless people forget who's been watching the longest. That night, instead of arguing or explaining myself, I booked a ticket. Alone. Not to prove anything. Not to escape. Just to step far enough away to see clearly what my silence had been buying everyone else. I didn't tell anyone I was traveling. I didn't post stories. I didn't send photos. From the outside, it probably looked like I disappeared. But the truth is, I finally stopped performing presence for people who didn't notice it anyway. The days after the anniversary were quiet. Too quiet. No calls from my parents asking why I wasn't there. No message from my sister checking if I was okay. No confusion. No concern. Just silence that felt organized. That's when I understood something I had ignored for years. My absence didn't create a gap. It created convenience. My sister stepped fully into the role she believed was already hers. The responsible one. The decision maker. The real daughter. She spoke on behalf of everyone. She answered questions no one asked her. She made plans without consulting anyone who wasn't in the room. And people let her. Because confidence sounds like competence when no one slows down to check. I heard things indirectly. A relative mentioned how beautifully the event went. Someone joked about how hard it must be to live so far away and lose touch. Lose touch. As if family were a signal that fades with distance. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend myself. I listened. Because when people believe you've emotionally stepped away, they stop hiding practical truths. And my sister started slipping. She complained openly about stress. About responsibilities piling up. About how much she was handling alone. But she never asked me for help. Not because she didn't need it, but because asking would mean acknowledging I still mattered. Instead, she leaned into her new authority. Spoke sharper. Decided faster. She began making choices she didn't fully understand, assuming confidence would cover the gaps. That's the danger of replacing quiet reliability with visible control. Things work until they don't. A few days later, my mother finally called. Her voice sounded tired, not emotional. Practical. She asked where I'd gone. I told her I was traveling. There was a pause. Then a simple, "Oh." No question about why. No apology for the invitation. Just acceptance. That hurt more than anger would have. Because it confirmed what my sister already believed, that I would adjust. That I always did. After the call, I sat alone in my hotel room and replayed everything. Not with resentment, but with clarity. I realized my mistake wasn't being quiet. It was being consistently quiet without boundaries. People hadn't pushed me out. They had slowly rearranged themselves around the space I never claimed. And my sister? She didn't hate me. She just didn't respect me. Because I had never required her to. While I was away, messages started circulating in family groups. Planning follow-ups. Discussions about finances. About paperwork related to my parents, things that had always come to me before. This time, my sister answered first. Confident. Quick. Incomplete. I watched from a distance as small errors crept in. Not dramatic ones. Subtle ones. Wrong assumptions. Missed deadlines. Oversimplified decisions. No one noticed yet. Because the structure still stood. But structures don't collapse loudly at first. They crack quietly, in places people assume are solid. I didn't step in. Not because I wanted things to fail, but because stepping in too early would save her from understanding what she'd taken for granted. And I needed her to understand it fully. Then, one evening, my phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. By the third call, I recognized the pattern. This wasn't casual. This wasn't social. This was panic trying to sound composed. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. Controlled. Forced. Call me when you get this. It's important. She didn't say please. She didn't explain. She assumed availability. I waited. Because the first crack had finally reached the surface. When I finally called her back, I kept my voice neutral. Not warm. Not cold. Just present. She didn't waste time asking how I was. She went straight to the problem. Something about documents. Something about timelines. Something about an approval that should have been simple but suddenly wasn't. She spoke fast, skipping details, assuming I already understood the system she'd stepped into without learning. I listened without interrupting. Every few sentences, she reminded me how urgent it was. How stressful things had become. How everyone was depending on her. She never said my name like she needed me. She said it like I was a tool she'd misplaced and finally found. I told her I was traveling. She paused, annoyed, then adjusted. Well, can you still help? You know how these things work. I almost smiled. Because she was right. I did know how things worked. What she didn't know was why. Years ago, when my parents were overwhelmed, I stepped in quietly. I filled out forms. I followed up on calls. I made sure things didn't fall through the cracks. Not because I wanted control, but because someone had to be careful. Back then, my sister was busy building her life. And I was okay with that. No one ever asked to change the arrangements later. They just assumed I'd always be there in the background. Until they decided I wasn't family enough to be invited to a celebration. On the call, I asked a simple question. Did you submit the updated paperwork? She hesitated. Then said yes too quickly. I didn't correct her. Instead, I told her I'd look into it when I could and call her back. She sounded relieved. Too relieved. That's when I knew she still didn't understand what was happening. To her, this was a temporary inconvenience. A delay. To me, it was a pattern revealing itself. Over the next 2 days, I received calls from relatives. Not emotional ones, practical ones. They wanted updates. Clarification. Solutions. They spoke to me the way they always had when things mattered. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fix everything. I answered questions carefully. I confirmed facts without offering shortcuts. I asked them to check with my sister for decisions. That confused them. Because for years, I had been the quiet constant. The invisible support. Now, I was present, but not compensating. And slowly, the pressure began shifting. My sister called again. This time, she sounded different. Less confident. More cautious. She asked if I could handle it, just this once. Said everyone was stressed. Said our parents didn't need this tension. Family language. The kind used when people want outcomes without accountability. I told her something honest. I don't think I should interfere without being officially involved. There was a long silence. She finally asked what that meant. I didn't explain. Because if I explained, she'd argue. And if she argued, she'd still believe she had control. Instead, I said I'd think about it and ended the call. That night, I checked everything. Every document. Every authorization. Every role I had quietly been assigned years ago and never removed from. Nothing had changed. Not because I forced it, but because no one else bothered to. The system still recognized me. My sister was operating on confidence alone. And confidence doesn't override structure. The next morning, the calls changed tone. No longer demanding. Now, nervous. Because the problem wasn't growing smaller. It was growing visible. And visibility is dangerous when your authority was built on assumption. I still didn't step in. Because the lesson wasn't ready yet. She needed to feel the weight of being seen as responsible, without having the foundation to support it. Only then would the reversal mean something. Only then would family stop being a word she used to exclude. And start being one she needed to redefine. By the fourth day, the panic stopped pretending. My sister didn't call to ask anymore. She called to plead. Her voice had lost its sharpness. The confidence that once filled every sentence was gone, replaced by pauses she didn't know how to cover. She said our parents were worried now. That things were stuck. That people were asking questions she couldn't answer. I let her speak until she ran out of explanations. Then she asked, very carefully, if I could come back. Not to attend anything. Not to be included. To fix it. I told her I wasn't sure yet. That answer upset her more than refusal would have. Because uncertainty meant she had no control over the outcome. She reminded me of family. Of responsibility. Of how much everyone depended on me. She never reminded me of the anniversary. She never acknowledged the exclusion. Because to her, that part was already settled. She had decided who belonged. After the call, I received a message from my mother. Short. Direct. Can you please help? Things are getting complicated. No apology. No explanation. Just expectation. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally aware of how automatic my role had become. I replied that I was still out of town and would call later. Within an hour, my sister called again. This time, she cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The controlled kind of crying that comes when someone realizes they might actually lose. She said she didn't understand why things were happening this way. That she had done her best. That she never meant to hurt me. That last part came too late. Because intention doesn't erase impact. And silence doesn't mean consent. I listened without interrupting. Then I asked her one question. Did you ever think to ask me before making that decision? She didn't answer. That told me everything. I explained, calmly, that there were processes involved now. That stepping in wasn't simple. That everything had to be handled properly. No anger. No accusation. Just facts. She agreed to everything. Immediately. Because when people feel exposed, they stop negotiating. That evening, I booked a return ticket. Not because I felt guilty. Because the stage was set. And if the reversal was going to happen, it needed witnesses. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different. Relatives avoided my sister's eyes. Conversations lowered when she entered the room. She wasn't being punished. She was being noticed. And that was worse. Everyone knew something was wrong. No one knew who to trust. I was polite. Calm. Unbothered. Which confused them more. Because people expect anger when they've wronged you. They don't know how to react when you arrive composed, with nothing to prove. That night, my sister tried one last time. She knocked on my door and said she was sorry. Not for the decision. For the consequences. I accepted the apology without comment. Because apologies given under pressure don't erase patterns, they expose them. And tomorrow, the truth was going to do the talking. All I had to do was let it speak. The meeting was already crowded when I walked in. Not intentionally. Not dramatically. I took an empty chair near the end of the table and waited. My sister was speaking when I arrived. Explaining delays. Using vague words. Avoiding specifics. She looked relieved when she noticed me, like reinforcement had finally shown up. But I didn't interrupt her. I didn't correct anything. I let her keep talking. Because the more someone explains without clarity, the more visible the gaps become. A question came from across the table. Then another. Timelines. Authorizations. Decisions that had been made without proper approval. My sister answered confidently at first. Then slower. Then carefully. Until she couldn't. That's when someone asked a simple question. Who's officially handling this? She looked at me. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. I spoke for the first time. Quietly. I am. The room shifted. Not dramatically. Subtly. People checked documents. Compared notes. Looked confused, not by me, but by what they were realizing. I explained, calmly, that I'd been listed for years. That nothing had been changed. That I hadn't removed myself. No blame. No accusation. Just truth. My sister tried to speak, but the momentum was gone. Her words didn't carry weight anymore. Because authority doesn't come from volume. It comes from alignment with reality. Someone asked why I hadn't been involved sooner. I didn't answer directly. I said I'd been traveling. That was enough. Because everyone in that room understood what it meant to be absent, and what it meant to still be responsible. The conversation moved forward without her leading it. Decisions were made. Processes clarified. And for the first time, my sister sat quietly. Watching. The same way I had. When the meeting ended, no one applauded. No one confronted her. They didn't need to. Status doesn't collapse with noise. It collapses when people stop deferring. Later that day, she cornered me alone. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading either. It was empty. She asked how long I'd known. I told her I hadn't planned anything. That I'd just stopped compensating. She said she didn't understand how things had changed so fast. I told her they hadn't. She had just mistaken silence for absence. That night, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't her. It was my mother. She said thank you. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Just recognition. And recognition, after being erased, feels heavier than apology. My sister didn't speak to me after that. She didn't need to. Because tomorrow, the final piece would settle into place. And the story she told about me, the one where I didn't belong, was about to collapse under its own weight. All that remained was closure. The call came early the next morning. Not from my sister. From a number I didn't recognize. A relative I rarely spoke to said there was confusion now. About roles. About who had decided what. About why certain things had been assumed. I listened, then said something simple. I was told it was only for family. There was a pause on the other end. A long one. Because once words are repeated without emotion, they stop sounding justified. By the afternoon, my sister finally called. Her voice wasn't defensive this time. It wasn't emotional either. It was small. She said she hadn't meant to make me feel excluded. That she thought I wouldn't mind. That she assumed I'd understand. I didn't argue with her version of events. I just asked one question. Did you think about asking me? She didn't answer. Then she said they needed help again. That things still weren't resolved completely. That people were expecting me to step in fully now. I looked out the window while she spoke. And when she finished, I said the only honest thing left. Do we even know each other? She went quiet. Not offended. Not angry. Exposed. Because that question wasn't an insult. It was a mirror. I helped after that. Not out of obligation, but on my terms. Clear roles. Clear boundaries. No assumptions. Things settled quickly once structure replaced confidence. There were no dramatic apologies. No emotional speeches. Just a quiet recalibration. My sister didn't lose her family. She lost her certainty. And I didn't gain power. I gained visibility. I didn't change who I was. I stopped allowing silence to be mistaken for permission. Family isn't about proximity or performance. It's about respect. And respect doesn't disappear quietly, it erodes when people assume it's unconditional. I still show up. I still help. But now, I make sure my place is acknowledged before my effort is accepted. Because the lesson wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering that even the quiet ones have edges, and when ignored long enough, they stop cushioning the fall. And that's when people finally learn who they were standing on all along.